There is a wood finish that bonds with the grain at a molecular level. It does not peel, it does not chip, it does not yellow. Colonial craftsmen applied it on a lathe with a cloth and a block of beeswax over 250 years ago. The recipe has 4 ingredients. Every one costs less than a can of polyurethane. We did not lose this finish because it failed. We lost it because it cannot be sold in a spray can with a barcode. A finish that lasts a century does not build a billion-dollar paint aisle. This is the story of the Colonial friction polish, the permanent finish that built America's finest furniture and was buried to protect the coatings industry. In the early 18th century, the finishing rooms of London's furniture trade were crowded with men known as French polishers. Their secret was not a trick of the brush, but a recipe. Shellac resin from India, denatured alcohol from local distilleries, boiled linseed oil pressed from flax, and beeswax from the English countryside. Each ingredient traveled its own long road. Lac beetles harvested on the subcontinent, barrels of spirit offloaded on the Thames, wax combs carted in from rural apiaries. By 1710, the Worshipful Company of Carpenters was recording apprenticeships that required mastery of this finish. A contract from 1712 binding Jean-Baptiste Leclerc to William Green spells out the preparation and application of the French polishing compound as a core skill. Shellac shipments arrived at London's docks from Madras and Bombay, their value tallied in the port ledgers, 6 shillings per pound, bundled with linseed oil and beeswax. The polishers themselves bought these materials in bulk, bypassing the apothecary's markup. By 1725, The Art of Polishing, a trade manual printed in London, described the 4-ingredient mixture as the premier finish for fine veneers. The method was simple but exacting. Dissolve shellac in spirit, enrich with oil and wax, then rub the mixture into wood with a cloth pad, using friction to drive the finish into the grain. Heat from the hand transformed the paste, evaporating the alcohol and fusing resin, oil, and wax into a surface that looked wet for decades. Merchant records trace the recipe's journey across the Atlantic. Letters from Thomas Sayer in London to Samuel Haynes in Boston, dated 1723 and 1729, discuss the export of pre-mixed tins of French polish, stamped with their origin and shipped to New England's cabinet makers. Port books from Philadelphia and Boston in the 1730s and the 1740s list regular imports of shellac, boiled linseed oil, and beeswax. By 1738, advertisements in the New England Gazette offered the finest French polish at Mr. Haynes's shop. In Williamsburg, Governor John Page's estate inventory from 1765 notes a cask of French polish, enough to coat all the furniture in his house. Workshop diaries bring the practice into sharper focus. John Jordan, a turner at the Williamsburg dock, recorded daily measurements of shellac, oil, wax, and spirit, meticulously blended for a set of mahogany chairs destined for the governor's hall. In Philadelphia, the apprenticeship contract of Duncan Fife, signed in 1792, required 3 years under a master known for his French polishing. His business ledgers from the turn of the century reference the finish again and again. James Holland's Boston Journal, spanning the late 1700s, describes blending shellac with alcohol, adding oil and wax, and rubbing until the surface shone as glass. Objects finished with this recipe survive. The Winterthur Museum in Delaware holds a mahogany highboy from 1765 with its original friction polished surface intact. Conservators note its characteristic amber hue and smoothness, evidence of a finish that bonds into the wood, not just over it. These pieces are not relics of a lost craft, but proof that the finish traveled from London's guilds to American workshops, embedded in the lineage of masters and apprentices, and preserved on the very objects that still stand today. The story of colonial friction polish is not a myth. It is written in port manifests, apprenticeship ledgers, and the grain of every untouched surface that has outlasted its maker. In 2011, the Smithsonian Museum Conservation Institute set out to test a colonial wood finish that had quietly survived for centuries. The formula, 2 parts denatured alcohol, 1 part pure shellac flakes, 1 part boiled linseed oil, and a final layer of beeswax, was simple, but its reputation for resilience demanded proof. Conservators began with microcores from 12 pieces of 18th century American furniture, each sample no bigger than a pinhead. Beneath the surface, they found a thin amber film pressed deep into the wood, unchanged since the colonial era. In the lab, Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy (FTIR) mapped the chemistry. Peaks at 1,735 inverse centimeters confirmed polymerized linseed oil, while a strong band at 1,660 inverse centimeters marked the shellac's cross-linked resin. Beeswax, still crystalline after 200 years, appeared as a broad signature between 2,850 and 2,950 inverse centimeters. These molecular fingerprints left no doubt. The original 4-ingredient recipe had survived intact, its structure preserved in the wood. To measure hardness, scientists used nano-indentation, a diamond probe pressed into the finish, recording resistance in real time. The friction polish averaged a Mohs hardness of 2.3, with some samples reaching 2.4, comparable to the softer end of modern varnish. But this finish was not a brittle film. It had fused into the grain, creating a bond that peel tests measured at 0.45 newtons per millimeter. Removing it without damaging the wood proved nearly impossible. Accelerated aging chambers exposed both new and historic samples to ultraviolet light and heat, simulating centuries in weeks. After the equivalent of 250 years, the finish showed a yellowing index of just 3.2, a shift invisible to the naked eye. Polyurethane, by contrast, began to yellow and craze after only 15 years under the same conditions. The finish's antimicrobial resilience extended further. Microbial assays placed treated and untreated wood in humid environments for a month. The friction polish samples suppressed bacterial colonies by a factor of 300, thanks to the ethanol carrier and beeswax's water-repellent barrier. This antimicrobial effect was built into the chemistry of the finish itself. Every ingredient in the Colonial recipe is recognized as safe for food contact by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Shellac holds GRAS, status number 7, used to coat pills and candy. Beeswax and linseed oil are similarly classified. Modern polyurethane and alkyd finishes, reliant on petrochemical solvents and plasticizers, offer no such safety record. A Smithsonian scientist summarized the findings. The 4-ingredient friction polish exhibits a chemically stable matrix. Shellac provides a thermoplastic backbone, linseed oil contributes cross-linking, and beeswax offers a water-repellent microfilm. The resulting composite remains adherent, hard, and resistant to microbial colonization over centuries. The laboratory confirmed what curators and woodworkers had long suspected. The Colonial friction polish endures not by nostalgia, but because, at the molecular level, it works. No synthetic finish has matched its combination of durability, safety, and ease of renewal. The proof lies in the grain and in the data. Between 1750 and 1850, the scent of shellac and hot oil was as much a part of American cabinet shops as the sound of saws and planes. Friction polish was not a luxury or a secret. It was the expectation. Duncan Fife's New York ledgers from the early 19th century read like a recipe book, listing shellac, boiled linseed oil, beeswax, and spirit, ordered in bulk and charged to clients who demanded the finish by name. On a March 1803 invoice for federal chairs, Fife specified French polish finish, per piece 2 shillings. Apprentices in his workshop learned the process as a rite of passage, rubbing the mixture into mahogany and cherry until the grain glowed. The finish was not reserved for the wealthy. Probate inventories from Salem in 1800 list friction-polished sideboards and chairs in the homes of tradesmen and merchants, proof that the polish had become a standard across social classes. In 1753, the Boston Gazette ran a notice for French polish, now prepared and sold by Mr. Haynes, suitable for all manner of cabinetry, turned work, and household furniture. The ad promised a finish that endures generations, resists the dulling of age, and may be renewed with a cloth. In Philadelphia, William Savory's shop ledgers show regular purchases of shellac and oil, always in the same proportions. Manuals like The Cabinet Maker's Guide simply assumed readers knew the recipe. No instructions needed, just a nod to what every craftsman already practiced. Workshop diaries reveal the daily rhythm. John Jordan, working the Williamsburg docks in the 1750s, measured out shellac and spirit for chairs bound for the governor's hall, recording each batch in ounces and minutes rubbed. The process became second nature: dissolve, blend, pad, polish, then seal with a drag of beeswax. In Boston, James Holland's journal describes the satisfaction of a surface shining as glass, achieved with nothing more than the friction of hand and the right colonial ingredients. The finish was a badge of credibility, not a guarded secret. Shop apprenticeships, like the one Fife signed in 1792, demanded years of practice to master the technique. Estate inventories from Williamsburg, Philadelphia, and Boston list casks of polish alongside tools and timber, valued for their ability to preserve a household's worth. Governor John Page's 1765 estate included a cask of French polish, enough to coat every piece of furniture in his house, a testament to its reach. For buyers, friction polish became a marker of quality and status. Furniture finished with the recipe fetched higher prices at auction and passed intact through generations. Probate records from Salem and Philadelphia show friction-polished pieces more likely to be listed as in good order decades after their creation. The finish's reputation for endurance and beauty was so established that advertisements rarely explained its benefits. French polish alone was enough. By the mid-19th century, the finish's dominance was so complete that its absence was more notable than its presence. Shop manuals and trade ads stopped describing the recipe, not because it was forgotten, but because it was as fundamental as the dovetail joint. The normalization of friction polish, from Fife's ledgers to Colonial advertisements, cemented its place at the center of American craft. Only with the industrial shift to synthetic coatings would this standard be questioned. In 1907, the U.S. Patent Office granted patent number 8734 for a synthetic resin called Bakelite. That single patent would set in motion a century-long transformation of the wood finishing market. By the 1930s, new filings for alkyd resins and phenolic varnishes filled the patent rolls, each one claiming a unique formula, a proprietary process, a reason to buy what only the factory could supply. The era of open recipes was over. Paint companies seized the opportunity. Synthetic coatings could be made by the ton, poured into cans, and shipped nationwide with a brand name and a guarantee. Trade journals from 1936 ran full-page adverts for Alkyd Clear and Polyguard, promising a future where finishing was faster, easier, and more durable. No skill required. An ad from DuPont in 1946 declared the slogan "Finish first, finish last," and pitched the instant sheen of Polyguard against the time-consuming rubbing of French polish. The message was clear. Tradition was for hobbyists. Progress belonged to the factory line. Today, the global paints and coatings market is valued at over $210 billion. Synthetic polymers account for more than 85% of all sales. In a typical U.S. hardware store, a shelf audit shows about 150 different synthetic wood finish products: polyurethane, acrylic, alkyd, and spray lacquer, while traditional shellac-based options are reduced to a handful, often tucked out of sight. Synthetic finishes now occupy roughly 90% of the finish aisle. The Colonial friction polish, once a staple, is nowhere to be found. This shift was not just about chemistry, it was about control. A 4-ingredient finish can be mixed in any shop, by any hand, for pennies. Synthetic coatings, by contrast, are engineered for repeat purchase. Polyurethane must be stripped and reapplied every 5 to 15 years. A 1-liter can sells for $12 to $18, compared to less than 50 cents for a pound of raw shellac. Multiply that by millions of homes and the numbers add up quickly. Industry analysts estimate that Americans spend nearly $4 billion each year on refinishing wood surfaces, including labor, materials, and waste. That figure would plummet if a finish could last a century. The strategy extended beyond the store shelf. Trade schools dropped friction polish from their curricula, replacing it with modules on synthetic application. Manuals and shop guides began to treat the old recipes as curiosities, not standards. Retailers, incentivized by higher margins and faster turnover, stopped stocking bulk shellac and beeswax. The finish that once preserved America's finest furniture was quietly erased from mainstream practice. Inside the industry, this was called innovation. Outside, it was a calculated capture of the marketplace. Intellectual property became the lever. Each new synthetic formula could be patented, branded, and protected against competition. The Colonial finish, immune to monopoly, was simply left behind. A finish that lasts a century does not build a billion-dollar paint aisle, yet the cost of this realignment is rarely counted in ledgers. Synthetic finishes introduce volatile organic compounds, VOCs, into the air, with EPA limits for solvent-based products set at 2.5 grams per liter compared to just 0.12 for water-based alternatives. The environmental and health toll is hidden in the fine print. The financial burden falls on every homeowner who must strip, sand, and recoat again and again. The Colonial recipe protects wood, is chemically inert when cured, and lasts longer than the person who applied it. But in the world of patents and planned obsolescence, durability is a liability. The market rewards what can be sold, replaced, and sold again. The story of friction polish is not just about a forgotten finish. It is about the economics of erasure and the quiet power of a craft that refuses to disappear. Every synthetic finish leaves a mark that lingers. The EPA sets the volatile organic compound limit for solvent-based polyurethane and varnishes at 2.5 grams per liter. Water-based versions are just 0.12 grams per liter, a 20-fold difference. Toluene, xylene, N-butyl acetate. These chemicals fill the air after every coat, flagged as hazardous under federal law. They drift through open windows, settle in dust, and linger in lungs long after the shine fades. The cost is not just environmental. Americans spend nearly $4 billion a year stripping, sanding, and recoating wood. A can of finish runs $12 to $18. The real price is in the cycle, with floors, cabinets, and furniture redone every 5 to 15 years by design. Durability is the enemy of sales. Colonial finishes mixed from shellac, alcohol, oil, and wax broke that cycle. Once applied, they bond with the wood, resist peeling, and can be renewed with a simple rub, not a full strip. EPA charts draw a stark line. Modern finishes flood the air with volatile organic compounds, while traditional recipes release only evaporated alcohol. The hidden costs are dollars, air quality, and wasted labor. They are the price of forgetting what once lasted. A finish that can outlast its maker is more than a relic. Across workshops and museum labs, a tradition persists. Among American woodturners, the Colonial friction polish remains a staple. A 2022 survey by the American Association of Woodturners found 68% of members still use shellac-based friction polish. Drawn by its ease of renewal and the warmth it brings to wood, qualities synthetic finishes rarely match. In conservation circles, the recipe is policy, not nostalgia. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London, a global authority on historic furniture, issued a 2020 directive. Original shellac oil wax finishes are to be preserved, not replaced. Conservators have documented that stripping these finishes often harms the veneer, while careful maintenance protects both chemistry and story. Professional finishers echo this stance. Bob Flexner, author of The Art of the Finish, said in 2021 that he uses the 4-ingredient mix for all his period pieces because it is historically accurate, low VOC, and frankly the final visual result is unmatched, especially on fine-grained woods like mahogany. This is not just tradition for tradition's sake. It is a living practice passed from AAW demonstrations to conservation benches, to books and videos for new makers. The path remains open. A finish that lasts a century does not build a billion-dollar paint aisle. Today, the 4-ingredient Colonial recipe, proven by museum collections and modern labs, remains chemically inert and outside the cycle of planned obsolescence. As petrochemical finishes dominate, the choice to reclaim this knowledge is an act of resistance. The wood endures. The secret was never lost, only buried. What you finish with is, and always was, yours to decide.